All right. You got a nice crowd out here tonight or this evening. You can be seated if you're standing. So I'd like to welcome everybody to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program teacher certification course. And I can see several faces in here, a few new faces. I can see some that I've seen before. And for those of you online, also welcome. And we hope you get what you're looking for out of this program. So we focus on, in this particular class, we focus on learning how to be a teacher, teaching the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And one of the things that that you'll see is that we do give you some hints or clues on how to suggest things to your students and how to bring it to where they will know and understand and possibly remember. Is there any possibility of getting the monitor on up front? Could we get the front monitor on? Okay, so we left off, we were going to be starting on page 197, and we left off there. But let's go back and look at Lesson Plan 7, page D. While you're turning there, Lesson Plan 7, page D in your self-control unit, while you're turning there, I'd like to do a little initial announcement that this Wednesday, classes will be canceled due to a special event here at the Peaceful Solution, and classes will resume on Sunday, October 30th. Sunday, October 30th, all right? So, again, classes will be canceled on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, and will resume on Sunday, October 30th at 5:30 p.m. All right? So enough announcements there. Let's get on with the class. So page 197, let's go ahead and look at procedure number 4 in Lesson Plan 7, page D. It says to tell students that they will study air pollution and ask students if they know what causes air pollution. Have students turn in their handbooks to page 197 to the section entitled, Let's Take a Closer Look at Air. Allow time for students to complete the assignment on the bottom of page 198. So we're going to go ahead and turn to page 197. I thought it was interesting. It says, let's take a closer look at air. And I'm looking at air all around me right now, and I really can't see it. Though I have been in some places where you could see the air very clearly, which we have a few pictures of and we'll talk about. So, okay, so page 197. And at the top of page 197, it says, let's take a closer look at air. It doesn't matter how long you can hold your breath, sooner or later you will have to breathe, okay? Air is essential to life, and not just any air, but clean, unpolluted air. The demands of our modern society have greatly increased the amount of pollution in our air. In many parts of the world, air pollution has reached dangerous levels. Some major sources of pollution that affect our atmosphere are, okay, the automobile industry. Now, that takes a pretty big hit here, talking about the automobile industry, and it has for some time. In fact, it talks about it a couple times in here. We're going to start out talking about the industry in itself. So when automobiles are produced, buses, trucks, other fuel-powered vehicles, the production of these vehicles requires large amounts of iron, steel, and aluminum, which is melted and shaped by heavy machinery powered by fuels such as coal, gas, electricity, etc. And these machines spew harmful smoke and gases into our atmosphere. The automobile industry produces on average 54 million new vehicles each year worldwide. 54 million new vehicles. That's an unbelievable sum when you think about it. At one time there were only a handful of car manufacturers, some that were well known, some not so well known, so it was more than a handful, probably 20, 25 different manufacturers. And then I saw in the 90s, I would say, I really saw where it started booming and other companies were coming about and building automobiles. And I know a little bit about that industry. So today, though, when you think about it, 54 million new vehicles worldwide. So if there were 54 car companies, which I'm pretty sure there are, each one of those would need to produce at least 1 million cars. That's a lot of cars for even a very large company like, Toyota, GM, whatever. Some of the big, I'm not trying to advertise their product. I'm just mentioning some names that you might know so you could kind of get an idea of how big it is. And most of these automobile manufacturers are involved in other areas too. It's not just automobiles. It's not just buses. It's not just trucks. They also make, airplanes, ships, and they're involved in all kinds of other manufacturing. So it's a pretty huge operation. In fact, at one time it was said that in some way the automobile touches every human being on the planet. The automobile industry touches every human being on the planet in some way or another. If you think about it, that would be true. Almost everybody's ridden on a bus or driven in a car or something or another. And then there are so many people that are employed by the automobile industry, whether it be the manufacturer of or sales of and so forth. Now, they produce a lot of this harmful smoke and gases into our atmosphere. And, if everything were really how it was at one time, and going back to a couple of the last classes, we talked a lot about microbes and how the microbes are in the air and how the microbes help form the rain and clean the air and so forth. And if the microbes were really taken care of, then these gases and smoke and everything that were produced could probably be cleaned up just by those microbes. But it's like anything else. They can be overwhelmed. Just like if you have a big bull out in the field and a little coyote comes along and starts yapping at it, he's going to kick it away. It's not going to harm him in any manner. He can handle it. But you get a pack of coyotes, which someone asked me how many is a pack. Well, I'm not sure of the exact number someone would call a pack, but I know if you got about 6 or 7 of them, you got a pack of coyotes. Not only coyotes, but wolves and so forth. These animals can take down a big bull because they're overwhelmed. They get worn out, and that's actually what occurs. And it's the same thing with our air. Now, I did have, actually, let me see if they're in here. I had a couple pictures I was going to show you. Well, I think they got left behind. Sorry about that. But if you can imagine, I used to live in LA when I was very young, and I didn't really know what smog was, but it was there. I knew that it was very strange because where I lived, I mean, it was normal every day. I could see a certain distance, but every now and then I could see further. And as a child, I didn't know what that was. I mean, I could see down the road and eventually down the road a ways, it kind of got blurry and stuff, and you couldn't really tell what was there. And you could see kind of the outline of the large buildings in Los Angeles, and they have some larger ones there now, some taller skyscrapers, but you could see the outline of them. But you really couldn't see them very clear. Everything looked so far away. And so it was kind of easy, I remember, to kind of stay in my general area because everything looked so far away. And then there would be a clear day, which I didn't know what caused that at the time, but I remember being able to look and see all the buildings in downtown clearly, and I could even see mountains in the background, very tall mountains that had snow on the caps of the mountains, San Gabriel Mountains. You can't see those on a regular day in Los Angeles. I mean, you just can't. You don't even know they're there. And then here comes the wind, and it's on a weekend or something, and people aren't driving as much, and the factories aren't spewing as much and all, and you can see the mountains. It's an amazing thing. And, excuse me, of course, I didn't know at the time that the harm that was probably being done as I breathed all that in either. and I don't think anybody else did. But as time went on, they became aware of it, and now I believe Los Angeles, from what I've learned, has some fairly clean days on a continual basis. But I remembered one time I went back there about 20 years ago, and as I was driving, there was about a 2-hour stretch from the desert to Los Angeles, and you have to go through this Interstate 10 pass between these two 12,000-foot mountains. I might have mentioned this in the last class, but I noticed that as I got through that pass and was getting closer to Los Angeles, I saw something up ahead of me, and it was just like a wall. It was a brown wall, and I was like, what in the world is that? Has there been a fire or something? And I got in it, and it's like, okay, well, I knew what it was. It was smog, because I could still see, and there wasn't any burning wood smell or grass smell or anything like that, but it was the smog. It was really, really, really bad. And at that time, I was very thankful I didn't live in that area. All right, so the automobile industry. And then we go to, if you continue looking there at your, at page 197, we go down to the next point there. And taking a closer look at air, we see that automobile exhausts, okay? Now, this was a big thing back in the day, back in the, 50s and 60s and before that. I couldn't tell you much about before that. I wasn't there. But there were automobiles, and nobody was too concerned about the exhaust of the automobiles at that time. As we started moving towards the 70s, there was a little bit of concern, and as we got into the 70s, there was a huge concern about it. In fact, such a huge concern that they came out with catalytic converters and unleaded fuel and made it available for automobiles because it was a big deal. So 54 million new vehicles in addition to the ones already in existence, and all of them have exhaust systems that throw harmful pollutants in the air. Can we show the first slide? Okay, so on this slide now, there's a couple areas highlighted there. I'm not sure you can read them, but it's talking about the massive amount of cars in the Los Angeles area. And there is like, there's millions of miles driven. I think it was 200. Looking on down that list, it goes into some of the specifications there, but I think it was like 200 something million miles, driving miles, driven. In what time frame would you think? I think it's 240. I think that's the number. 240 million driving miles driven in a certain time frame in Los Angeles. Daily. Can you believe that? 240 million driving miles in Los Angeles alone. And there's like 9.8 million vehicles registered in Los Angeles. It's a huge amount. And on the next slide, if you could show that, it gives a few more statistics about how many people actually live in the Los Angeles area. And in the outskirts, it's like 1,700 something people per square mile in Los Angeles County. But then you get to the city, and it's like 7,300 something, I believe, within the city per square mile. Now think about a square mile for some of you that live near the Peaceful Solution headquarters here. Think about 1 square mile and think about how many people live in that 1 square mile. And think about packing like 7,400, 7,300 people into that 1 square mile. That's a lot of people, isn't it? Just think about that. And so as you do that, think about all these people commuting and driving their cars each and every day in that area. And then go another step further. That's just in Los Angeles. Take another step and go to San Francisco, for instance, where you're going to have something very similar there. Though San Francisco's not as large, there's a lot of cars there too. Take Oakland, take any of the large cities on the West Coast, and then go ahead and move a little east. Come on down to Phoenix and Las Vegas, and just keep on coming. and you get to Texas and you come to Dallas and Austin and Houston and San Antonio, and all of these cities are spewing out these things, and they have similar numbers of the cars that are registered, especially here in Texas. You know, people like their cars, they like their big trucks, and so we've got a lot of pollution that does come from cars too, and they keep trying to work on it. But one of the things that was surprising, going back to LA for a minute, one of the things that was surprising to the folks in LA was when COVID started, you know, the cars were, I mean, there were many cars driving around at that time, and they got a long stretch of clear days. There weren't a lot of the factories that were operating full capacity on a daily basis. And so when you get rid of all that, there was a lot of clean air or cleaner air, and people were seeing those San Gabriel Mountains each and every day, wondering, where did this come from? So, well, let's think about that for just a minute. And in the peaceful solution, you know, we drive cars too. It is the accepted form of transportation for most people, I think, in the United States. In some of the bigger cities, you have commuting and carpooling and, you know, buses and trains and subways and so forth, which help the problem a little bit, I think. But all in all, I don't see any of us getting rid of our cars anytime soon. And as much as we want cleaner air, we do still have to get around. We have to go to work. We have to go to school. You know, gather the things that we need, whether shopping or whatever. And so we still have these cars, and it's not going to go away overnight. Let's take another step here and look at the industrial factories. They use a lot of energy to manufacture consumer products, resulting in the release of smoke, toxic fumes, and other dangerous chemicals into the atmosphere. Now think about something. There is industry that actually uses mostly electricity, and they're not spewing out a bunch of toxic gases and so forth. There are industry that use mainly electricity as their source for the manufacturing. Where does that electricity come from that they use? Well, you know, you got to go back and look at where everything's coming from. The electricity might sound like a wonderful thing at the beginning, but then you look and see where it came from, and you go and follow it back to a factory that's, you know, whether with coal or whether nuclear powered or whatever form of power that is being generated for that the generation method of the electricity, it's polluting also in most cases. Then you look at all the equipment that was built and used in those electric manufacturing facilities, or even the facilities that generate the electricity. Where did they come from? Well, they were manufactured too, and so it just keeps on going and keeps on going. So we can go all the way back to where even this paper that we have here tonight in these books, that paper was created through a manufacturing process at a paper mill somewhere. And I'm a little bit familiar with paper mills. If anyone here has ever been around one, there is a stench in the air within about 30 miles of it that is really rotten. And so if anyone has, you know what I'm talking about. And when the wind blows in a certain direction, it takes that stench with it. And sometimes it's a very acidic stench also. That brings us to some of the things that accompany the industries out there. So some of the harmful chemicals that pollute our air from these sources are carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen oxides. Excuse me. With the help of sunlight, these chemicals react with our atmosphere and produce what is commonly known as smog. Smog is a combination of smoke and fog, and smog is visible as a dense haze that floats over many cities all over the world. Pollution in the form of smog is no laughing matter. While it can have an effect on all people, smog can have serious effects on the very young and old. It is especially dangerous to people with asthma and heart disease. history has proven that in extreme cases, smog can lead to serious illnesses. And we'll turn over to page 198, and death. Now, I haven't personally known of anybody that died, death certificate said died from smog inhalation, but I know of a lot of people that had very bad problems with asthma, other respiratory problems, and it was probably due to a lot of that. In 1948, in the steel mill town of Donora, Pennsylvania, intense local smog killed 19 people. Leave it there for just a minute. In 1952 in London, over 3,000 people died, and in 1962, excuse me, another 700 died because of carbon monoxide poisoning as a result of smog. Another consequence of air pollution is acid rain. Acid rain is as dangerous as it sounds. Let's have the next slide. Okay, this is a car that has experienced acid rain. Now, some of you that are seated here tonight and some of you out there on the internet probably live in big cities or have lived in big cities and that have a lot of industry, and you probably know what we're talking about here. Now, they make products that you can put on your car and try to fend off some of this acid rain, but it's very caustic. You can go ahead and put up the other slide. Okay. So what I want to talk about here for a minute is values. And values are very important. This is what you base everything on. Your values as you grow up. You build this value system. Now, you don't just sit down one day and say, oh, I like this value, I'll put that in there, and I like this value, I'll take that one too, and make a list of the values that you want. You grow up. You start out as a little baby, and as a child, you grow up getting your values from the people around you, and also building values as life goes on. Some of the people that you get values from are neighbors, parents, siblings, co-workers. All of these things are influences on you that have an effect on your values. Values are very important, and for those, and the reason I'm mentioning values here, and this is page 6 in your character unit, by the way, the reason I'm mentioning values to you tonight is because when you look at these, like the steel mill, for instance, in London, so many people died, 700 died because of carbon monoxide poisoning in 1962. I mean, that's amazing. When you follow the trail and you go back to the CEOs, the heads of the companies, the founders, and so forth, most of the time the leading driving force is going to be money. And that's what it is. And so some people have such a high value in their value system on money. You can take the slide down for now. Some people have such a high value on money that they throw everything else aside. And they don't value human life. They don't value respecting others and concern for others. They don't value making sure people have a joyous, healthy life. And that's one of the things that we here at the Peaceful Solution are trying to help change the hearts and minds of people to where they can choose the right way and choose the right values to make part of that value system, where they actually can say, I do want to improve my values, and this is what I would like to do, and take note of it and work on it. It takes effort. It takes effort to build positive moral character. But moving on for a minute, the acid rain is as dangerous as it sounds. It's created when sulfur dioxide and oxides of nitrogen mix with water vapor. When this dangerous combination falls to the earth in the form of rain, it corrodes marble, statues, and buildings. Excuse me. In addition to this, acid rain can seriously damage forests, crops and other plants. It makes streams and lakes unsuitable for fish and other wildlife. Acid rain has been known to contaminate fish so they cannot reproduce. And so you see the stop sign right there, stop and think. And I'll pull this out. It's been a while since we've seen it, but stopping and thinking, you got to know what to think about. Because anybody could stop and think for a minute and just move on with what they're doing. But if you stop and you think and you consider your options, now you're being trained, and you that are training as teachers are training students to live the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And so with the knowledge that you have, you find a way to put it to work. And here's a way you can put it to work. You stop and you think and you consider your options using the Peaceful Solution, of course, and then you proceed with the right choice. You have to evaluate the entire situation. You have to evaluate those choices of which would be the better way. We already know that anything negative is not the right way. We want to do something positive, but we would like to also choose something positive that is going to help further what we're trying to do. Let's take a look at a scenario here on page 198. Now, if you were a policymaker, what steps would you take to control the pollution of our atmosphere? So think about that for just a minute. I'm going to repeat it. If you were a policymaker, what steps would you take to control the pollution of our atmosphere? It says to use the lines below in your book, if you have it, to list some of your suggestions. So think about that for just a minute. What would you do? All right, so if you were the policymaker, what steps would you take to control the pollution? And whatever level of policy making you would be in, there seems like there's always someone above you in whatever level you're at, but it still doesn't mean that you should sit back and give up. But here in our book, there's actually a suggested a possible answer that people might come up with. Answers will vary, but might include using the media to put out public announcements to educate people on the dangers of pollution in the air, encouraging industrial factories to find more efficient ways to manufacture their products, and rewarding companies that find ways to reduce pollution and finding those companies that do not. Now, we've seen some of this take place in society today. We've seen companies fined and companies sued. There's one going on right now where the drinking water at some military fort or military installation, the drinking water was messed up with chemicals from local factories and so forth. And so they're trying to build a class action lawsuit to sue and get some money. Mostly the lawyers, I think. But rewarding the companies, the fines don't really seem to work that well. First of all, a lot of times companies take into consideration, going back to the heads of those companies and their value system and what they think is right and what they care about. And if they care only about money, they might include in the price of whatever their product is a certain amount to set aside for when they do get sued for the damage that they know they're doing. That takes place. It's a sad thing, but they do. And when you see a major billion-dollar company, a multi-billion-dollar company, and they've done something that hurt many, many people, and they get a $100,000 fine, do you think that's going to matter to them? No. It's a pittance. It would be like you or me being fined a quarter or possibly even less. It's going to be like, oh, well, that didn't hurt that bad. So keep in mind, one day you might be the policymaker. And so keep all these things in mind. Keep everything in mind that you learn in the Peaceful Solution. Excuse me. Keep everything in mind as you move on, because you probably will be in a position of making policy of some type in one way or another in your lifetime. All right, if we go back to Lesson Plan 7, page D, Lesson Plan 7, page D, and let's look at procedure number 5. Explain to students that we must consider our actions and how we treat our water supplies, and instruct students to read the section Thirsty Anyone? Found on page 200. Now, something I would like to mention before we get to page 200 is we just finished page 198, and we have a page 199, coming up before 200. There's page 199. Well, we want to take a look at page 199. We just don't throw that out because it goes along with the air that we breathe. Before we change to, even though it'll be the same subject about contamination and pollution, we're going to be talking about a different area of it. So let's continue on in controlling the air we breathe. Clean air is essential to great health. Smog and acid rain, which can lead to sickness and the destruction of forests and lakes, is not something society can afford to ignore. Excuse me. The Clean Air Act, passed in 1970, requires that our air contain limited amounts of pollutants. This law makes industrial factories and other sources of air pollution accountable for the amount of pollution they allow into the atmosphere. And remember, the atmosphere is the area above, well, not only around us right now and the earth itself, but it's that area above the earth that stretches way out there. And it's limited. It's like we have that layer, the ozone layer, that they would call it, a firmament, if you will, that once you're past that, then you're in space. But in this atmosphere that we need to be working on keeping clean, remember there's a lot of microbes that are doing some jobs there. Scientific fact, though science didn't find out about it till much later, it is a scientific fact, and it's being shared now amongst those who are believing it. For a while, those that were finding these microbes in the air and the bacteria living out there, having productive lives and everything, the people were mocked, actually. And now they're finding out it's true. So the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, was created to monitor and enforce the standards set by the Clean Air Act. In addition to this, state and local governments assist in controlling pollution in their jurisdiction in a variety of ways. Some states, like California, for instance, offer incentives for people to carpool, thereby limiting the amount of cars on the road, which is very important, especially in those large cities. Now, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, now it's a governmental agency, and if you follow the news, if you follow these governmental agencies and you see some of the policies that are initiated from them, you're going to look at some of them and say, what in the world? How is that supposed to help the environment? It's kind of strange, isn't it? But we have to understand that, once again, just because it's a governmental agency, and I'm not cutting down government, there has to be government, otherwise there's chaos. We need true, honest, just government that cares for the people. And that's why I say some of you will be policymakers along the way. You might find yourselves in a governmental position where you have authority over certain areas where you have to make a choice between right and wrong. The people in a lot of these agencies have not been taught the peaceful solution and how to truly care for people. They're living with the value system that they grew up with. They're living with the influences that are all around them. And I mean, I've been to Washington, D.C., and I was always glad to leave there because the influences just around are unbelievable. The hustle and bustle and the cutthroat nature of some of these some of the people that are trying to get trying to advance their career and get in a higher government office is just unbelievable. And you can see it and feel it all around when you're there. So you got to remember, though, they were not taught the peaceful solution. And that's why we're being taught, and that's why you as teachers are being taught to teach others to also teach and to carry on in learning true respect for other people and learning how to practice self-control when some money's thrown in your face and you just have to stop and think, is this what I should do? Should I do this or not? Well, the peaceful solution is going to pop into your head like immediately, and you won't have to give it much thought. You'll know the answer is no. You're not going to take that money. You're going to do what's right for mankind. In fact, let's show the next slide there. Okay, well, this one is a little bit out of order, but that's actually an old newspaper clipping showing the Donora, Pennsylvania smog cited at 18 deaths. In the book it said 19. I think they landed on about 21 deaths from that thing and from the smog. I mean, it was so bad people couldn't breathe and they ended up in the hospital and died. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. That was just a little retrofit right there. Okay, so morals. What are morals and why are they important to society? And how do we form those morals? Well, the morals are like that line you see right there. It's like a line drawn between right and wrong. If you have positive morals, you're going to do the right thing. If you're immoral, you're going to do the wrong thing. Now, one of the ways you can show that you have positive morals, the bullet points there, the exact order, I can't see it on there right now, but of course, your attitude towards all life, including, human, animal, and so forth, your attitude against people or about people's property, what is your attitude about that? And also your attitude about the environment. How do you feel about these things? What are your thoughts about these things? Do you care about human life, but when it comes to the environment, you couldn't care less? Then that line right there that you're looking at between right and wrong, you're falling off on the wrong side of that line. You need to get back in line, just like a road map. Or just like driving down the road and you get a little bit over to one side, you correct it and get back over to the other side, right? Well, this is what we have to do in the peaceful solution. From time to time, you're going to make some bad decisions and some bad choices. And what you have to do is you got to get back on track. You have to realize you're not on that straight and narrow line again. You're falling off onto the wrong side, onto the immoral side, and you make that decision. You've set your mind in advance, that you're not gonna stay there, that you're gonna jump back and get back in line. So you're building that great moral character that we all want and need to be able to show true care and concern and to practice self-control. Okay, let's continue on page 199. In an effort to keep our air clean, pollution control authorities take samples of the air and also samples of the smoke coming from industrial factories to determine how many pollutants are in them. Here are a few other ways that air pollution is being addressed. Automobiles are being designed to run cleaner. I'm sorry, I'm kind of chuckling a little bit here, but the invention of a device called a catalytic converter made this possible. This device causes decomposition of harmful gases into mostly harmless products. Now, these statements are statements from authoritative sources that state this is how it is. And while the catalytic converter has made it possible to clean up some of the solids and burn out some of the gases that are going out the exhaust, they've got their own problems too. But yet, this device was created and put on cars starting back in the 70s. And the gasoline, in fact, now contains additives so that it burns somewhat cleaner. And if we know more about the microbes, we can know what truly clean burning and clean and unclean burning is, and how those microbes will be affected by those things. Gasoline now has ethanol in it, and quite a bit of it, and it's debatable on what that does. I don't think we really know what it does yet to the atmosphere. So we have to always be looking at these things. Industrial factories are changing the way they manufacture in order to produce less waste. This means moving away from coal and finding cleaner fuel to burn. Some cities provide free public transportation on days when the smog is very high. That's an interesting thing. The sun's rays are being harnessed in the form of solar energy to heat homes and offices. And yes, other than, solar is pretty neat, because other than the industrial waste that might have been created in the processing and production of the solar panels and the associated charge controllers, inverters, and batteries that go along with that, solar is a very clean and cheap way of getting energy. Now, yes, companies do charge, depending on what company you find that has the items available, they might charge a little or they might charge a lot. So it can be very expensive if you choose that company for whatever reason. It can be very cheap at the same time. But I think more people are starting to see that solar really does work for them. I mean, you can go down to a local hardware store and buy a little solar panel as big as my hand right here that you can stick out there and charge your phone, or run a little fan off of if you like, for anyone to see that there. So you can do a lot of things with that one little solar panel. A little bit larger solar panel, probably about 1 foot long by 6 or 8 inches wide, would harness enough of the sun's power to keep a battery maintained, like an automobile battery, for instance. Keep it charged, a lawnmower battery, a remote operated gate. You could keep that battery charged for that. It's great for that, and they're very inexpensive. So those are pretty great things. But what makes a lot of the difference, before we go to page 200, what makes a difference in all of this is, if you go back to page 191 for a minute, I wanted to focus on this a little bit tonight, because it is all about attitude. I don't know how I can stress that enough. I've been in sales a long time, and one of the things, I remember having a hat at one time that said, attitude is everything. And that was stressed to the salespeople too, that it's the attitude. Because just like I heard a speech here some days ago that was talking about some chickens. A man was talking about some chickens that he had, and how the chickens would kind of run from him and never really came around him much. And he was like, well, if those chickens come around me, I got the food here and everything, And so someone told him, well, it's the attitude. What kind of attitude do you have? And he realized that when he was looking at those chickens and dealing with those chickens, he was dealing with them purely on the attitude of they were a food product. He was thinking, hey, chicken legs, It was a food product. That's what he was thinking of. He wasn't thinking that they're also an animal that experiences joy. You can tell, you can see the chickens playing around sometimes. They reproduce. They eat. They get joy out of eating and so forth. So his attitude started changing towards those chickens. And within a matter of a short weeks, something like that, these chickens actually started coming up to him. And they would actually peck his feet, wanting their food. Hey, we're ready now. Go ahead and feed us, the guy with the food. Help us out here. And so it actually worked. His attitude changed. So it was with the sales also, automobile sales in particular, is that, and when I mention that, some people might consider that they've pulled up at a car lot and seen, 10 salespeople run out at them trying to get them, That does occur sometimes, but I think they might have the wrong attitude. Remember, attitude. because attitude is everything. And what we saw was that if you have an attitude of all you're going to do is make as much money as you can on that customer, you're not concerned at all about their well-being, you don't care if you sell them a two-door car when they really need a four-door, five-door SUV for the 6 or 7 children they have, and you're selling them a two-door car just because you could make more money on it, possibly, you know, depending upon the situation. I've known people like that. And their one goal was to make as much money as they could on that customer and to get another mark on the board for the sales contest. And that's all they were concerned about. Absolutely zero concern for the customer themselves and what they needed. So when we would train for attitude. And the attitude was be more like a real estate agent, a counselor. You know, you don't go see a real estate agent and pull up there in your car and say, you know, I saw this house over here on this street. I'm going to go look at it. And I saw your sign at this street. I want to look at it. And I really like that big old house on the hill back there. I want to go look at it too. You don't go in there and do that. They're going to find out first a few things. They're going to find out if they can help you find something in your price range. That's a very important thing. If you're going in there looking at a $1 million house and you need to be looking at a $50,000 house, they're going to guide you in the right direction. They're going to find out some information and they're going to share information with you. And so that's what we started doing in that business, and customer satisfaction improved drastically, as well as sales, because you didn't even have to, there was no pushing, there was no forcing the sale, there was no pressure. The people were really relaxed, and you were more of a counselor to them. And you let them know that, hey, whether you get something or not today doesn't matter. What matters is if we have the right thing for you and we can make it work for you. It made a huge difference. And so the reason I'm telling you that story is to kind of stress that attitude works in everything. It works in your work life. It works in your personal life. If your attitude is, oh man, I got to go home to that screaming kids and, you know, that ruckus going on and TV blaring and whatever rotten stuff she's cooking tonight, if she's cooking at all, you know, if that's your attitude, it's going to show. It's going to show when you walk in the door. It's going to show to your children. It's going to show to your wife. It's going to show to your family in general. And vice versa. If their attitude is, oh no, he's almost home, let me go find something to do, I don't even want to see him, or her, whatever the case might be, you know, and I'm getting sick and tired of fixing this food in here, and the children are like, I don't want to listen to him, Mom lets me ride the bike all the time, I don't know, he's going to make me stop. You know, if you have that attitude, guess what? It's going to show. And there's going to be friction in the household. So there's your work life, there's your household life, but if your attitude is like, wow, I really can't wait to get home and see my wife, or you know, or vice versa, if you're married, or you know, you can't wait to get home and see your children, you know, if that's your attitude, then that's going to show also, and you're going to have a much better family life, guaranteed. You'll be doing things for them, and they'll be doing things for you. And you can actually get an idea of learning what it's all about to, and I'm going to say this dirty word to some people, is serve. You know, that's what we do here at the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. We want to serve. We want to serve you, the aspiring teacher. We want to serve the students. We want to serve all of those around us in any way we can. And by that, I mean serve in a way that helps them to build their moral character, to be able to choose between right and wrong, to make valid choices that aren't going to be harm to them, anybody else, or property, or the environment. That's what we want to do. We want to serve in that capacity, and then as people learn, then they will also want to serve in that capacity too. And what you find is, as you have an attitude of this, you know, servitude, if you will, if you have this attitude, it shows. You're less likely to get in arguments and encounters where you could be harmed, getting in a fight. It's really an interesting thing when we go and we talk to prisons or schools. They want this Band-Aid most of the time that they can stick on their problem being anger or fighting or problems with other areas with boys and girls and so forth. And they want to put this Band-Aid on there, or they want this magic pill that's going to fix it and solve it all right there. But that's not how it works. You have to go back to the problem that created it, You have to go back to the teachers that are bad influences on the students. You have to go back and look at the different things that you do teach and where it's leading. It doesn't change overnight. You have to have the attitude of serving, not the attitude of pride. So your attitude is the way you think and feel about something. This is page 191. And to practice self-control regarding the environment, you must have a caring attitude about the world around you. Did you get that? You must have a caring attitude about the world around you. You can't just throw it to the side. This means not taking the air you breathe and the food you eat or the water you drink for granted in any manner. The truth is, unless we care for our environment, clean air, water, and nutritious, healthy food might not always be there for our use. And that's what we're starting to see today. We would have had to go back in history, kind of back to the basics, back to the basics to grow food in a different manner than what the chemical-laden corporate farms are doing right now. We'd have to go back to true organic. We would have to go back to not harming our water supply. We would have to go back to not harming the air supply. And in that way, serving and taking care of the microbes also. And I see a few smiles, because it does sound a little bit strange, possibly even for some of you out there watching on the internet, to be talking about the microbes and be talking about them as if they were, people or something. But it is true. They do have to be served too. They have to be taken care of. Because if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. Remember, everything, including yourself, you're made up of microbes. You're made up of it. Even on your face right now, there's billions of microbes right there, I just saw somebody wipe some microbes on the table. So you got to remember, these microbes are everywhere. Anything you touch, I could touch this, it's got it. I could touch this, it's got it. They're everywhere. They're made up of microbes. We've learned to harness the microbes by force in a certain manner, but I didn't mean to get too far into that, but it all comes into play with this, and you've been hearing about it the last few classes. When was the last time you actually stopped and thought about the fact that you're connected to the earth and it to you? Remember? It's common knowledge when a body disintegrates, it turns to dust. In fact, they say at some funerals and stuff, from ashes to ashes and from dust to dust. You've probably heard that before, maybe in a movie or something, who knows. But I think that is said sometimes. And it is true, though. It goes back to ashes and dust. When something burns, it goes back to ashes. Something decomposes, it goes back to the dust. So, that's what you are made of. You're connected to the earth. All life forms affect the earth in one way or another. This is on page 191. And remember, we want to show a caring attitude towards all life, all human beings, all of the animals, all of the plants and trees, and so forth. And yes, we do eat certain things like animals and plants, the right ones, and they're there for that. And they enjoy their life, and they're there to serve, and they do serve us in that capacity because they're microbes too, and we ingest them, and it helps the microbes within us. We're just a big fat microbe, this whole earth, It's all over, trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of microbes, okay? The interconnectedness can be easily overlooked as you go about your daily routines. We don't normally think about the air we breathe because breathing is automatic. We don't think about it till we get sick. So don't wait until we're adversely affected by contaminants in the environment to take notice of our food, water, and air supply. We want to develop that caring attitude about the environment because the quality of your life is affected by the world around you. And going back here for a minute, on page 199, it was talking about the EPA, and we talked about the heads of these corporations and everything, where a lot of times the thing on their mind is money. And you can see it if you listen closely, if you're watching any kind of, reading any articles or watching any news clips or anything that have some of these heads of corporations on there, and they're talking about their profitability and so forth, and that seems to be the thing that's talked about mostly because a lot of people has started investing in corporations and stock market and so forth, and they want to see their stock go up. They don't care what they have to do. They've got a blind eye kind of to it. They don't care what they got to do to get that stock up there. They just want it to go up. A lot of times people have money invested in stocks and other investments that they're not even aware that those investments, those companies, go against their very morals of what they claim to be their morals in producing their income. And so that's something to be aware of too. But again, we want to make sure that we care, we show true care and concern towards ourselves and other people and all life forms. We want to show care and concern to our property and other people's property. And we want to show care and concern and have that right attitude about all these things. We want to show care and concern for the environment too. We didn't quite get to page 200, but if we go back to the lesson plan just real quick, Lesson Plan 7, page D, we've covered all that we were to cover, and this is a guide for us to walk us through the peaceful solution, and each one of the chapters has a lesson plan in it for us to work with. So we'll be in procedure number 5 again, because we got to that point of reading the first part of it and going to page 200, but we stopped along the way to page 199 because it wasn't listed, but it was very important to go through. And you'll find that from time to time in the books that for whatever reason there was one page or another that really wasn't listed, and that's okay. We know they're there. And since we care about people, and since we care about things, and we care about the environment, we're going to do everything we can and get every bit of knowledge out of there that we can to put it to use in using the peaceful solution in our life. So I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. And I'd like to remind you and everybody online that might have joined us is that this Wednesday's class is canceled due to a peaceful solution event here at headquarters. And the next class that we will have is on October 30th at 5:30 p.m. We look forward to seeing you all there. And, have your pens and paper ready to take notes and have your books ready. And you can always download the books, too, on Facebook. If you're watching it there, you can download it at the top of the page. It comes in really, really handy, I can tell you. So thank you for coming.